I should hit the record button before I start talking, and it might be ready by the time that we're going. Next time. I think it's recording. That's awesome. That's going to be on the start of the video. Okay, the third form that we're going to create. It's called slope point form. All right, they got that equation right here. Right now, we're using slope point form. The reason why we call it slope point form is because it can be used when you know the slope, obviously, and any other point. Slope y-intercept form was specifically for slopes and y-intercepts. Slope point form is for any other point. So it can be used a ton of the time. Awesome. It looks like this guy right here. When you're looking at that form, the y and the x that don't have numbers will always be the y and the x. All right? They're not going to change around. The ones that have the little number under it, it's this guy and this guy. So bad. The y1 and the x1, those are the values from your random point, or whatever point you're choosing to use. Okay, so when they say slope point, this is where your point comes in. This is incredible. I told you my theory on this, right? Like they purposely make our computers get worse so we convert to Chromebook. Convinced it's happening. They're taking over. The m value, what does m always stand for? Slope, right? So this m value right here, that is your slope. Okay, and that's not going to change. Anytime you see the letter m, they're referring to slope. Right? Unless they specifically say it's something else. Awesome. Let's scroll down and see if we can do a question. I might just have to do it on the whiteboard beside us. I think the computer's done working today. It's been a stressful weekend for it. A lot going on, grad. Hey, there we go. So, that's example 1. State the equation in slope point form of the line through the given point with the given slope. So, state the equation, same thing as like determine an equation, create an equation, right? Those are all the same words. So, it says determine the equation, state the equation. You're building one of our 3 equations that we have. You will never build in general form. So that means you really only have 2 choices. You're going to create slope y-intercept, or you're going to create slope point. Whatever you have for info decides on what you do. When you look at our info right now, we have a random point, 6, 5. That's completely random to us. And a slope value. This would be the perfect example to do slope point, where this is x1, this is y1, and this is m. x1, y1, m. We can then go to our slope point formula and just plug in those values. So the formula is y minus y1. 5 is y1. Equals m, which is 3, bracket x minus x1, which is 6. This equation would create a line with a slope of 3 and goes through the point 6, 5. Not bad, right? So if we look at B, if we were to put that thing in slope point form, we would call this x1, y1, x1, y1, and this m. When you're putting this in the formula, I'm going to try changing colors if it doesn't blow up or something. You go y minus y1, so y minus, and y1 is negative 1, equals m, so negative 4, x minus positive 4. That's me just using the formula and substituting the numbers. However, that's not how we would leave our answer. Anybody want to suggest why I wouldn't leave that as my answer? Something I'd want to change. This is what I'd want to change. We wouldn't write minus -1. Right? We don't like double negatives. Instead, we would write that as plus. This would be my answer in slope point form. Y plus 1 equals -4, x minus 1. Awesome. So for C, since we have a double negative, right, we have our x1 is -1, or -9, and our y1 is -8. We would change both of them to be positive. Instead of saying y minus -8, I would say y plus 8 equals m, which is 1/2, and then x minus -9, which is plus 9. That would be my equation. If you were to work in reverse, right? If I was to look at this equation and say, okay, here's your equation. What point does it pass through? A lot of people would look at that and say, oh, it passes through the point 9 and 8, because they see +9 and +8. But remember that the formula has negatives. So it's actually the reverse of how it looks. This thing passes through the point -9, -8. It's opposite of how it looks when you're trying to go kind of backwards. Look at a point and create something like that. Fantastic. Classic example 2. In each case, the slope of the line and the point of the line are given. Determine the equation of the line in slope y-intercept form. These are the questions that are tricky. They give you some information. They say create slope y-intercept form. So people look at this and they instinctively try to create slope y-intercept form, when realistically you can't. Right? You cannot take this thing and create slope y-intercept form because you have a slope and a random point. That means you have to create slope point form and then change it to be slope y-intercept form. So whatever it says your final answer has to be, doesn't mean that's how you create it. You might have to create a different equation, change it to the one they want. In our case, we're going to create slope point form because we have a random point. When we do that, we're going to have y minus 2. Right, that's my y value over here. Equals m, which is 5, bracket x minus 5, which is really plus 5, right? I've now created an equation that follows these rules, and I'm going to change the equation to be the formula they wanted, which was slope y-intercept. To change forms, if you're in slope point form, the first thing you do is expand. You're going to multiply anything that needs to be multiplied. This 5 needs to multiply into the brackets. It's our first step. We then would have y minus 2 equals 5x plus 25. And that's starting to look more like slope-intercept form, right? Got rid of the brackets. It's a little bit closer. The only thing that we need to fix now is this minus 2. Right? Remember, slope-intercept form has y all by itself up here. So I need to move that 2 by adding 2 to both sides. My final answer is y equals 5x plus 27. These equations are the same equation. Right? They create the same line. They're just in different formats. One of them slope point form, we then change it into slope intercept form. But they're the same format, same line. Sorry, different format, same line. Awesome, we'll try B. The idea is to get it into slope y-intercept form. We can't right now. We can't because they gave us slope and a random point. They never gave us a y-intercept. So our job is to just let the question guide us, create what we have, and then change it to what we want. That's x1, y1. Let's create slope point form. So I have y minus 4 equals negative 7, x plus 3. Let the question guide you. Create whatever you can. Then convert to what they want. They wanted slope point form, slope intercept form. So we need to get rid of these brackets somehow. We get rid of these brackets by multiplying the negative 7 in. First job is expand. That leaves me now with y minus 4 equals negative 7x minus 21. Remember, it's a negative 7 multiplying in, so it changed to be minus 21. We then have to move that 4, so we add 4 to both sides. My final answer would be y equals negative 7x minus 17. Right, negative 21 plus 4. Remember, both of these equations make the same line. They're just different formats. So this unit, this is when it kind of starts to get confusing. Because you get questions and then I can't possibly do this question. You can. You just have to start with what you're given and then change it to be whatever you want. Awesome, we have a couple people here who attempt to do exactly what we were just doing. So it says, determine the equation in general form of a line with the slope negative 2 passing through this point. John clearly remembers slope intercept form, but Nikki remembers slope point form. Compare their work, which one is started. Their work, which is started below. So, we're looking at John's work. John took this information, he took his slope, he took his point, and he could only remember slope intercept form. So what he did was he took slope intercept form and he plugged in x, y, and m. Like that. By doing that, he was left with only one letter, the y-intercept. He actually is really far off, but he's actually going to be able to fix his work to end up getting the y-intercept. So if you wanted to find the y-intercept, you could use slope intercept form and just put x and y in and put your m value in. Then what you would have to do is try to get this letter by itself. And then you would know what b is, your y-intercept. To get that letter by itself, we're going to have to multiply negative 2 and 3. It would be negative 5 equals negative 6 plus b. We're then going to add 6 both sides. That gives us 1 equals b. If John wanted to create slope intercept form, he now has an m value, because m was negative 2. And he now has a b value. His b value is 1. Because he's found both things, he could now create the y-intercept form. John's answer would be y equals 2x plus 1. That's a negative 2. I would know recommend that strategy. I think it just confuses people, right? So when they look at this stuff, I like to always just say X and Y, leave as X and Y as much as you can. However, that is a legitimate strategy to find the Y-intercept value. Nikki's work is how I would recommend doing the question. So Nikki took the info, the slope equals -2, the point at 3, -5, and Nikki changed this to be x1, y1, and changed this to be m, and use slope point form. You'll notice she's plugged everything in. Now she's going to try to change it to be slope-intercept form. First thing I would do if I was her, I wouldn't write -5, I would change it to be y plus 5. The second thing I would do if I was her is I would multiply that -2. -2x plus 6. Now that Nikki has slope point form and has multiplied in, she's one step away from slope intercept form. All she has to do is subtract 5. Subtracts 5 from both sides to get the final answer of y equals -2x plus 1. Two different ways to get the same answer. I like Nikki's strategy. I think you should just let the question guide you. You have slope at a random point, let it guide you, convert it to what you want. So that's how I will always do those questions. Awesome. That might be it. One more. Oh yeah, okay. So here's this beautiful grid. It says the line of the grid passes through at least 2 points with integer coordinates. That just means it passes through 2 points perfectly. Determine the equation of the line in general form. So determine the line, or determine the equation, means create an equation. Okay? You're doing the creating. In general form. I'll give you a hint. We never make general form. Not possible. What you do is you make slope point form or slope intercept form and change it into general form. But we can never create in general form as our first step. First step is choose slope point or slope intercept. Looking at this graph, could you tell me for sure where that y-intercept value is? No, it looks like it's really close to like -4.5, but we don't know for sure, right? It could be -4.4, -4.6. We don't know. If I don't know my y-intercept, then I'm definitely doing slope point. Okay, I just think slope intercept is the easiest way when possible. So we know slope intercept's not an option. We're going to create slope point form. The only way we can create slope point form is if we have a slope and a random point. Let's start with finding the slope. Here's a beautiful line. It's a picture. The best way to get slope using a picture is to use which formula? Rise over run. Perfect. Remember, picture means rise over run. So looking at this guy to figure out my m value, I'm going to use rise over run. To use rise over run, I need to pick 2 points on this line. Try to pick 2 perfect points. This one looks like a perfect point to me. And this one looks like a perfect point to me. There's a few others on there. It would work as long as you find 2 perfect points that cross the grid nicely. Rise over run. This thing is going down 1, 2, 3. So down 3 minus 3. And to the right 1, 2, 3, 4. To the right 4. My slope -3 over 4. You wouldn't know that because my marker just dropped everything everywhere. Awesome. Part 2 of creating this equation. I need a point. Right? Ideally, I'd use the y-intercept, but I can't, right? Just like we discussed earlier. So I need to pick a point on this line. Any point will do. So I've got 2 points already labeled. You could pick other points as well. Another perfect spot appears to be right here. And I think that's it. That's it. Any of those 3 points could be used to create this equation, and you'd be fine. Let's use the one we haven't talked about yet. So let's use this point. This point is -6, 0. By finding a point like that gives me my x1 and my y1. Any point would do. Now that you have x1, y1, I can create my equation. My equation is y minus y1, which is 0, equals m, which we figured out was -3/4, bracket x minus x1. We have a double negative, so we make it x plus 6. Like that. Beautiful. This equation represents this line. Do you think I would normally write the -0? Probably not, right? I'd probably just leave it as y. But I'm writing -0 so you can see where. Awesome. Point 2. Looking at this thing now, that does create this line. However, it's not in the form the question wanted. The question wanted in general form. So we need to convert that to general form. Remember, general form had 0 on one side, everything else on the other. So we need to try to do that as well. The first step, get rid of those brackets. Take that -3/4 and multiply it in. This is a kind of an ugly fraction you're multiplying in, so I'd probably use a calculator to do it. All right. I mean, I'm going to have y minus 0, which is just y, equals -3/4 times x, just -3/4x. Like that. But -3/4 times 6 is a little bit trickier. So in your calculator, if I were you, I would go bracket, -3/4 bracket, right? So the fraction's in brackets, so your calculator knows it's a fraction. Then I'd say times 6. I'd hit enter. You get an awful decimal. And then you'd hit math frac. Right? The math button's on the left side of your calculator. Right here. Woo, math right here. Hit math. The first option is fraction, so you hit the first option frac. And then you would end up getting your beautiful fraction of 6/12/18 divided by 4/2, so it'd be 9/2. -9/2. Is that right? People seem to really be questioning that. Is that right or wrong? Let's check. Is that what you got? Oh, good. That's a good sign. -3 divided by 4 times 6. Math frac. -9/2. If you didn't get -9/2, make sure you put brackets around your fraction in your calculator. It'll help. If you don't, it sometimes screws it up. Fantastic. So we expanded. This is now slope-intercept form. We want general form. General form is equal to 0. We're really close to equaling 0. Right now we're equaling y. Remember last week we learned to get to general, we just subtract y to the other side. So minus y, minus y. That gives us 0 equals -3/4x. Then we had a minus y. And then we had a minus 9/2. You can put 4.5 if you want. that is now equal to 0. That is now in general form. Once in general form, we must follow our general form rules. Right? What we talked about at the start of class. First rule, the A value, the number in front of x, has to be positive. Currently, we're breaking that rule. Second rule, no fractions or decimals. So I like to leave it as a fraction because then it's really easy to know what to multiply by to get rid of the fraction. If you put it as a decimal, it's a little bit tricky. We're going to fix both of these rules in one go. To fix the positive issue, only x has to be positive. X is currently negative. To change it, we change all the symbols. So instead of this being negative, we're going to change it to be positive. This instead of being negative, positive. This instead of negative, positive. That's the easiest rule to follow because you just go and change everything. The no fractions rule is a little bit trickier. So your job is to figure out what the number on the bottom of your fractions are. Okay, we have 4 and 2. And to figure out the lowest common multiple between those numbers. Lowest common multiple means what are two numbers that 2 and 4 can both multiply to become? 4, right? 4 is 4, so 4 times 1 is 4. And then 2 times 2 would be 4. So the lowest number they both could become is 4. That's the number you're going to multiply every fraction by. Every number, in fact. Like y is not a fraction, but we're still going to multiply by 4. So we go into here and we multiply everything by 4. When you do that, 4 times 0 is still 0. Equals. It's now positive. To do this calculation, the 4 only multiplies to the top number. Okay, so it would be 4 times 3, and then divide by 4. So in your calculator, 4 times 3, hit enter, then divide by 4, you end up getting 3x. We then have minus y is now a plus y. We then multiply by 4, that's plus 4y. The last one, we have 9 divided by 2, and we're timesing it by 4. We go 4 times 9, hit enter, divide by 2. You get plus 18. This equation is now general form, creates this line. You can see how this unit gets hard. That was a lot of skills we just used. We use rise over run to figure out our slope. We then use slope point form to create our equation. Then we converted to general form, and then we followed our general form rules. That was 4 different things all combined into one question. This unit gets hard because it's little individual things all built up to one big package. And you need them all to be able to get every question right. That's why I've been stressing practice the little stuff, because you have to get them all. Awesome. We've got 4 questions here. These will go fast. I've already kind of alluded to it. So it says, in each case, state the slope of the line and write the coordinates of a point on the line. So you look at this question right here. When they give me the equation, my first goal is to try to figure out the form that it's in. Looking at this, it's definitely not general form. General form always equals 0. It's definitely not slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form always has y by itself. This thing is slope point form because I can literally write slope point form right above it and notice that everything matches up. Except I put minus 11 instead of minus 1. close. It's so good. Alright. Ready? There we go. Yeah. What? I was wondering where it went. I thought it erased. That's hilarious. I wish I knew how to actually do that, because then I would. Awesome. That's slope point form. I think we can all agree on that. Looking at that, that means I should be able to tell you the slope and a point that it's passing through. The slope is usually pretty obvious. Okay, the slope's the number outside the brackets. My slope is 1/7. My point, not as obvious. The reason it's not as obvious is because of the negative signs. It throws people off. So if you're looking at this, we read our points as our x values first. Looking at our x1 here. Notice that the negative symbols are in the formula and in the equation. That means those negative symbols like pair up. My actual x1 value is just 4. It's not -4, it's just 4. It's the opposite of how it actually looks in the equation. Same deal happens with my y1s. So looking at my y1s, I should have, according to my formula, minus a y value. I actually have plus a y value. The reason that happened was because we had a double negative. This is actually -11. It's the opposite of what it looks like. That means for part B, my slope is -5/3. M for slope. My point is not -7 and -9, it's +7 and +9. Opposite of what it looks like. Sometimes people reverse them and they would say this is 9, 7. Remember that y's are beside y's, x's are beside x's. For part C, looking at that thing, if I had to figure out the slope, again, the slope's usually the easy one. The slope is -3. The random point, however, the x value would be +6, right? Opposite of what it looks like. The y value is non-existent. Right? There is nothing over here. So what would the y value be? It'd be 0. Right? Just like I alluded to earlier, I wouldn't write +0. I just wouldn't write anything. That's why it's just y. For D, D is technically slope-intercept form, but we can still kind of use the same rules as this guy. Right? We're going to look at it. We're going to pair it up with slope-intercept form. This is y equals mx plus b. And because it's slope-intercept form, I would look at this and say, okay, the slope is -3, but my point is 0, -6. And it's actually -6. Because slope-intercept form, you actually just pair it up and match it up. Slope-point form is when you reverse the symbols, when you're pulling your point out. Slope-intercept, no brackets, I just follow what it actually tells me. Okie dokie. So